The movie starts with an orphanage in London in the middle of the night. The manager of the orphanage goes to the door to lock it, but she finds magazines in front of the door and gets busy with them. And there's also a little girl named Sophie, who wearing her blanket and watching what's happening, so she goes by herself to lock the door, and adjust the clock to 3, and on the way back, she takes the mail and turns off the light. Sophie says that she loves 3 o'clock because it is the time when magic happens. After that she goes to put the letters in the manager's office, and she hears a disturbing sound from outside, and sees 4 drunk men, so she shouts at them, and tells them that there are sleeping children, and threatens them to call the police if they don't go. Then she turns off the outside light and closes the window. The men see a huge shadow on the roof of the orphanage, so they get very scared, and flee quickly. So Sophie thinks that they were afraid of her threats. Then she goes to the ward where she sleeps with the orphans, and goes to her bed, covers herself, and uses a flashlight to read her book. Then the manager comes, and Sophie turns off the light quickly, pretending that she's sleeping, and she hears a voice from outside, so she goes to see through the window. Then she breaks the rules set by the manager, which is not to get up from the bed at night and not to go to the window, and not to look behind the curtains. She goes to the balcony and finds that the cats in the street are the ones that cause the sound. Suddenly a giant hand appears and carries the garbage bin, and puts it back to its place, and then he appears to be a giant, and looks at Sophie while he's worried because she saw him. Sophie runs to her bed, but the giant enters his hand through the window and carries her blanket, and her book. The giant runs through the city of London, carrying Sophie and her blanket, and he's very good in hiding, using his body and his cover to pretend that he is a wall, or a load on a truck when someone passes by, and when the giant comes out of the city, he runs with giant steps, jumping between the fields, bypassing the sea, jumping in the sky between the clouds, and reaching his cave, which is his house, and hangs Sophie from her blanket in a tree branch, and goes to cut giant vegetables, that look like cucumbers. Sophie seizes the opportunity and tries to escape, so she gets out of her blanket, and walks on the branches of the tree that was hanging on it, and finds a window. She opens it with difficulty, but things fall on the ground and the giant sees her while she is trying to escape, so he comes and turns out that he can talk. He tells her that she will not be able to escape if she doesn't have wings to fly with. Then he closes the window, and Sophie falls into the pot in which the giant makes food, so the giant carries the pot and puts it on the table and continues cutting the vegetables. Sophie asks him where they are. He tells her that they are in the giant's land. Then, Sophie hears a voice from outside and gets scared, so the giant tells her that they are his fellow giants and they have names. Sophie becomes terrified and tries to convince him not to eat her, but the giant laughs at her, and tells her that he doesn't eat humans. Sophie tells him that he kidnapped her, and she's an orphan, who lives in an orphanage, and that the children hate her, and the orphanage is full of strict rules, and life there is not happy, so the giant curses the manager of the house because she's strict in dealing with orphans. He gives Sophie her glasses, she puts them on, and asks him are all giants as nice as him. The giant pours for himself, from the food he made, and tells her that giants eat humans and bully him, because he doesn't. Sophie doesn't understand why he kidnapped her if he wasn't going to eat her. The giant tells her that he had to kidnap her because she will reveal his secret, and tell people that she saw him. Sophie keeps swearing that she won't tell anyone, and wants him to take her back to the orphanage, but the giant decides that she will stay with him, for the rest of her life. After the giant finishes eating, he puts the blanket on Sophie, who refuses to be quiet. Sophie tells him that she will escape from here at any cost. So he carries her and tells her that if she escapes, the giants will catch her and eat her. He put her on a nest at the top of the ship that the giant uses as his bed. Sophie sees him preparing his bag, and carrying a jar that lights up, and tells her that this jar contains dreams. Then Sophie tells him that she doesn't dream because she suffers from insomnia. The giant reads to her from her little book until she falls asleep, and then he goes to the cave, and lifts a handle that controls a door behind the waterfall. This is the door to his secret laboratory, which is full of jars that contain dreams and light up. The giant mixes the jars to create a nightmare for Sophie. Hours later, Sophie wakes up and finds the giant sleeping in the ship, so she escapes and runs alone in this strange place, and suddenly another giant appears and grabs her. Sophie sees the gentle giant closing the door of his house, and looking at her sadly, and the other giant eats her. Sophie suddenly wakes up and finds out that it was a nightmare that the giant had made in the laboratory. The giant carries her and puts her on the table to have a breakfast with him, and Sophie sees a bottle containing a sparkling liquid, and the bubbles in it descend to the bottom instead of rising to the top. The giant tells her that this is an unusual alcoholic drink, and he drinks from it, and farts a fart that makes him fly from his place. Then the leader of the giants enters them, and wants the gentle giant to treat his finger, and he speaks like children. Sophie hides and hears the gentle giant telling the leader that he will treat him later. The leader gets angry and says that he must treat him immediately, so the gentle giant brings a bowl of water, and it turns out that the leader is afraid of water. He also brings cloth and treats the wound. Then the leader smells the scent of a human being, and asks the gentle giant if he caught a human being. Sophie hides inside vegetables that look like cucumbers, and the leader searches the place to find the human and says that he is hungry, so the gentle giant gives him a piece of vegetables to eat without knowing that Sophie is inside it. The leader is about to eat the vegetables, but the gentle giant notices Sophie's feet, so he reminds the leader that he doesn't like vegetables. So the leader throws the cucumber on the ground, and takes the bottle of magic drink with him, and tells the gentleman that he is a disgrace to the giants. The gentle giant puts the cucumber on the table, and Sophie comes out dirty, so the giant takes her to the laboratory, and washes her with water and lets her take a bath while she is on his palm. Then he exposes her to fire in order to dry her, and bring a box containing clothes for humans. Sophie changes her clothes, and the giant puts Sophie's things in a hole in a tree for her to sleep in, and when Sophie finishes changing her clothes, the giant carries her and puts her in a hole in the tree, and aims to go to work. Sophie asks him what he does and promises him that she won't tell anyone. He tells her that he catches dreams, but Sophie doesn't understand, so she tries to persuade him to take her with him to work. With her insistence, the giant agrees, but only one time. Sophie climbs onto the giant's shoulder, and they leave the cave, and he shows her the rest of the giants sleeping in the fields. He walks quietly so that the giants don't wake up, but the leader wakes up and catches the gentle one from his foot, and lifts him up. So Sophie falls and hides in a vehicle, and her blanket also falls. The leader keeps playing with the rest of the giants with the gentle giant, whose body is much smaller than the rest of the giants, so they keep playing with him, as if he is a ball, and bully him. One of them grabs the gentle one and puts it on a vehicle, and pushes it on a slope, and another giant brings another 2 vehicles, which Sophie is in one of them, and puts a sled on them, and skates down the slope to meet the gentle one on the other side. Sophie sees that they will hit the gentle giant, so she changes the direction of the car, and makes the giant open his legs, and hits the gentle one's vehicle, and the leader and the rest of the giants laugh at what's happening. Then it rains, and the giants who are afraid of water hide. So the gentle giant brings Sophie and flees away. The leader finds Sophie's blanket and smells it, so he knows that there is a human among them. The gentle giant goes with Sophie to a place between the clouds, and they reach the dreams land, and it is night time. The giant tells Sophie that he can hear the stars, trees and animals. He puts Sophie on the ground. She sees a lake that reflects the image of the tree. The dark tree lights up in the reflection, and the giant tells Sophie that his body was big like the rest of the giants, but when he dived into the lake, his size became smaller. Then he jumps into the lake, and Sophie jumps behind him, and discovers that the lake is a magic gate that takes them to the dreams world, and there, the giant begins to collect the lightning dreams that falls from the magical tree leaves. One of the dreams is weird and flies quickly, and the giant couldn't catch it easily. Then the dream turns to Sophie, and the giant manages to catch it finally, and puts it in a jar. Then the shape of a Sophie's face appears in the jar. The giant encourages Sophie to catch dreams, so she can catch a red dream, but the giant takes it from her quickly because it's a nightmare. After that, the giant disappears, and Sophie calls for him, while she's worried, but appears to be on the other side of the lake and extends his hand through it, and pulls Sophie to his side. They move together, and Sophie decides to name the gentle giant BFG, which means Big Friendly Giant. The giant takes Sophie to London and has a magic trumpet of dreams with him, so he starts blowing dreams to the children while they are asleep, and tells Sophie that his age is like the age of the earth, and that he had existed a long time before humans, and that he can hear the hearts of children and her heart also. When he finished his work, he and Sophie returned, and on the way they hid when they saw giants on the ground. BFG asked Sophie where is her blanket. She told him that it fell from her in the land of giants, and the giant worried about this. And then Sophie woke up and found herself in front of the orphanage, and BFG tells her that he feared for her from the rest of the giants, and he had to bring her back. And when Sophie doesn't listen to him, he tells her about a child that used to live with him, but the giants found him and ate him. BFG returns alone, and Sophie goes back to her bed in the orphanage, and remembers BFG's words that he can hear her heart, so she goes to the balcony and jumps from it. But the giant comes and grabs her before she reaches the ground and saves her life. Then he decides to take her home with him. The leader sees them while they are on the way, BFG goes to the laboratory to find a way to prevent the giants from eating humans, and suddenly the leader and the giants enter and destroy the place to find Sophie, who is hiding in her room, and when the giant smells her scent, she runs and hides in another hole in the tree, and discovers that it is the child's room that BFG told her about. The leader sees her, so BFG decides to be brave, and face the giants. He brings a bucket of water and scares the giants with it, and keeps them away from Sophie. Sophie sees the image of the queen in the boys' room, and she has an idea. She comes out after the giants leave, and tells BFG that she will ask help from the queen, and in order to get this, BFG must make a special nightmare for the queen. BFG goes to make it in the laboratory, and makes a mixture of dreams containing children, giants, and the army, and puts it in the jar. Their plan is to make the queen dream of what happened, and after the queen wakes up, she sees Sophie and BFG from the window. BFG became worried because he doesn't want anyone to see him, but Sophie convinces him of the plan. They went to the queen's palace after they infiltrated the guards, and reached the window of the queen's room while she was sleeping. BFG used the magic trumpet to blow the dream into the queen's mind, and when the queen woke up she was afraid, and told the maids about her dream, and one of these maids named Mary prepares the queen breakfast. She hears what she dreamed and opens the newspaper to read news about the disappearance of the children recently. She knew that what the queen dreamed of is real. Sophie appears, whom the queen saw in the dream, and tells them about the BFG, and makes them promise that no one will harm him, and then Sophie calls out to BFG, so he appears to the queen and the guards, and the queen orders the guards to leave him after they besieged him because they suspected that he's dangerous. BFG approaches the queen's window and bows to her respectfully, and tells her that he came asking for help. The queen agrees to BFG's plan, then the queen calls the army commanders, and gives Sophie good clothes, and they all go to breakfast in the palace. BFG enters the palace, walks on his knees, and finds a table designated for him, and he likes eating people's food very much, but he does not like coffee, and he spits it on the servants. After that he takes out a bottle of the magic drink, and presents it to the queen. The army leaders arrive and the queen commands them to eliminate the evil giants in the land of giants, and BFG guides them on the way to the land and gives them a magic drink that makes them fart and fly, and the queen orders them to start implementing the plan. BFG goes to the land of giants and flies after him army helicopters, then BFG and Sophie arrive at the laboratory and make nightmares for the giants. After that, they go towards the giants, and BFG tells Sophie that her dream is to have a family, and that she won't be able to achieve her dream if she stays in the orphanage. And he also tells her that he will bring her back anytime she wants. And when the sun rises, it's the right time to blow nightmares into the minds of the giants, but BFG forgets to bring the magic trumpet with him, so Sophie uses her small body to put nightmares in the minds of the giants herself. But the leader wakes up and sees her, so Sophie breaks the jar and puts the nightmares into the minds of the giants. The leader grabs the nightmare assigned to him, and destroys it with his hands at a time when the rest of the giants are dreaming of nightmares, and the leader tries to catch Sophie, but BFG comes and defends her. Then the leader grabs the BFG and tries to kill him, but army helicopters appear and throw nets and ropes on the giants, and the giants can't free themselves from it, and helicopters fly to an isolated island and put all the giants on it, and throw them a box of giant cucumber vegetable seeds for them to plant and eat from. Sophie returns to London and stays with Mary in the Queen's palace, and she wakes up one day after dreaming of BFG, that he lives happily in the land of giants, and he eats human food after learning to grow it instead of bad-tasting cucumbers. Sophie goes to the window and talks to BFG, despite the distance between them, but she is sure that he hears her, so he smiles, because he actually can hear her,